The extraordinary thing about Leonardo da Vinci is he wasn't just any genius. He was a genius at science and a genius at art, which doesn't seem possible. Because at my school, like most schools, every class had one brainy kid who knew all the answers in science. Magnesium sulfate, sir. And they'd always have a little extra bit. Unless, of course, it's been exposed to freezing nitrogen. And these kids were useless at art. And then every class had a kid who swore at teachers, a skinny kid who was brilliant at climbing, a kid who stank, a compulsive liar who'd say things like, my brother runs a space station, and a kid who only came in once a week and the rest of the time trained greyhounds for his uncle, and sometimes he'd sit at the back of the class with a crossbow. That was the kid who was brilliant at art. Whereas the greatest work of art that most of us in the class ever achieved was to scrawl, Michael is a tosser, with tosser spelt wrong. But Leonardo da Vinci would also have been top of the class in maths, geology, music, grave robbing and designing tanks. And he displayed a common characteristic of genius in that he hardly ever finished anything that he set out to do. Leonardo was born in 1452 in the small town of Anciano in the region of Vinci, hence Leonardo da Vinci, in case anyone was thinking, oh, that's a coincidence. Now, despite the claims that he was born in this house, no one knows exactly where it was. So if they hear us say that, they'll probably send someone out to go, no, I remember, I see him run around here as a small boy riding bike that he invented. 15th century craftsmen and traders were developing a new perspective known as humanism, in which every human should think for themselves. Humanists reappraised the Bible and Aristotle, reprinting the original texts. And men, instead of being seen as miserable souls playing out their allotted role, were seen as in partnership with God. Which is why later on in the Renaissance, Michelangelo could paint his famous ceiling, with God and Adam the same size, as if God and man were a team. Leonardo was born into this visionary environment as the product of a fling between his father, Ser Piero, who was a clerk, and his mother Caterina. For the first few years of his life, he lived with his mother, which is what led to Freud's assertion that Leonardo had a mother fixation, which is what made him gay. From the age of about 5, he lived with his father, and he had no formal education, partly because he didn't come from an elite family. And when he was a teenager, he and his father came to live in Florence, a city-state of 70,000 people, over half of which worked in small workshops producing cloth or wool, at a time when most of Europe still worked on the land. This made it a centre for art and music, like 1960s Greenwich Village. But artists were dependent on commissions from the ruling families, in particular the ruling Medici, who modestly called himself Lorenzo the Magnificent. So they're so flamboyant, the Italians. I shall be Lorenzo the Magnificent. Whereas our monarchs went, oh, I don't know what to call myself. Has anyone had the unready? Leonardo impressed Lorenzo the Magnificent when one of his sketches attracted a crowd for 2 days. And from then on, his novelty was the scientific method with which he approached his art. He decided that pre-Renaissance art was flawed because it failed to portray images in accordance with the way the human eye receives them. Leonardo recognised that the eye perceives a total picture, that at any one time we see all that's before us, although we don't see each object equally. So to recreate the image seen by the natural eye, a painter has to have a mathematical understanding of perspective. Obviously people had some idea of this before the Renaissance. You didn't get people coming back from Egypt saying, well, we got about 5 miles from the pyramids and they're only about an inch big. Such a disappointment, we turned around and came home. Before painting a field, he would study the botany of the flowers in minute detail, and a contemporary called Giovan Battista Giraldi wrote,
when Leonardo wished to paint a figure, he first considered the social standing, whether troubled or serene, irate or quiet. Then he went to places where he knew that kind of person assembled, and observed their faces, manners and gestures, and repeated this procedure many times.
In other words, he was a method painter. His mathematical approach even extended to his system for calculating the cost of his work. The bill for decorating a palace hall read,
outlay for blue, gold and other colours, 1.5 lira. 24 pictures of Roman history, 14 lira each. Philosophers, 10 lira.
Just like a builder, That's probably how the Mona Lisa ended up like that. He went, oh, I mean, with a whole laugh, you're looking at 15 lira plus your labour, then you've got your teeth, you see. I'll tell you what I'll do. For 12, I'll do you a faint grin, make it good, you'll never know the difference. And he was like a builder in another respect, in that he never seems to finish. In his mid-20s, he got his first independent commission that's recorded, to sculpt an altarpiece in the chapel of St. Bernard. He received a first payment, but Leonardo never did the work. He was contracted to deliver another altarpiece for the Chapel of the Conception in Milan, but he never did it, which led to the church taking out a legal action which wasn't resolved for 25 years.